This week on Sega Talk, we're stepping back into the 16-bit era, but not the way you expect. Tanglewood is a brand new game built for real Sega Genesis hardware, programmed in assembly, shipped on physical cartridges, and developed almost entirely by one person. We'll break down how it's made, the brutal development challenges, and what it tells us about what the Genesis was truly capable of.
SegaBits presents Sega Talk, a podcast talking all things Sega! With your hosts, George and Barry.
Look, it's a giant talking egg. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the master here. Say what?
Hello and welcome to Sega Talk. I'm your host, George, and with me, like always, is Barry.
Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to the final episode of 2025
ever.
And ever. And I've done some math, George. We average about 21 to 24 episodes a year, and considering this is episode, what was it, 177, I think. There is a very good chance that we could hit episode 200 at the very end of 2026.
That's
do
something
you think we
to
can
look
do
forward
it?
to. I think anything is possible.
We have to do it.
At that
as
point,
long
yeah.
as there's a hater out there saying we can't do it, we got to keep doing this. Because I've told people before, everything I do is motivated by spite. I have to prove the haters wrong.
I need to see those haters in the comments right now, letting us know 200 an impossibility. Let us know.
The audio's bad. Get a new mic.
Is that? And you want to do the Patreon plug?
I would, after all that negativity. You can check us out on Patreon. We have a loyal community of folks who support us there. You can get the show 2 weeks early, both audio and video formats. There's different tiers there. You can also support us. You can tell us what to cover. You can pick episodes. You can be a Patreon picker at our premium tier, or you can even join the wheel picker tier. But I'm actually going to let all of you click on over there and check out those tiers and the specifics of those. I do know, though, that this is a picker wheel pick, and I'll have to go back and figure out who's the picker. So I'll give them a shout out momentarily. But why don't you kick the show off again?
Tanglewood was released in 2018 for the Sega Genesis / Mega Drive and was developed by Big Evil Corporation, led primarily by developer Matt Phillips. Unlike most retro-styled indie games, Tanglewood was designed from the ground up to run on real Genesis hardware, not that fancy stuff like Sonic Mania, whatever. Can't even run on the Saturn. Using authentic era accurate limitations, workflows, and constraints. Philip was said to from the very beginning that he wanted to pretend it was the 1990s again and experience development as a Sega Genesis programmer, how they used to do it back in the day, and instead of just simply ripping off a Sega Genesis look. The game stars a fox-like creature named Nim, who must survive a hostile forest filled with predators, environmental hazards, and puzzles. Storytelling is conveyed entirely through animation, sound, and environmental cues. There is no dialogue or text at any point. Based on this alone, does Tanglewood feel like a lost Genesis title, or does it feel like a more modern indie experiment?
That's interesting. To me, just looking at it, it seems like a lot older than what it actually is. When this was selected by Ben Hayward, who is our Patreon picker wheel tier, which means it goes into a wheel. He may or may not get picked. Ben, I don't know if he is a big fan of this game. I guess we'll find out when we read the memories. But Yeah, looking at it, I was like, this has got to be like maybe like just when Sega started, like 2010. I
Oh.
remember we interviewed the developers, so I was thinking like, okay, maybe we talked to them like in 2011. But yeah, 2018, it's a lot newer than what I expected, and I think graphically it definitely looks like a Lost Genesis game, though I think art wise, like the cover art, gives it
Mhm.
away as being much more modern because it's. I mean, I think if they really wanted to trick us, which I don't think this was a game that intended to like fool us,
No.
they would have had like a Greg Martin style artist with like airbrushing and like the fox would look completely off model.
I actually agree with that aspect of it, because when I saw the cover, I was like, it has a more modern look to it. It kind of, I don't know why, but when this game was being promoted, I always thought it reminded me of Ori the Blind Forest a little bit. So when I played it, I always assumed it was supposed to have some sort of combat Metroidvania style, whatever. And was surprised that it was more like an old game, like one of those like hazardous games. I would say it's a lot better than something like what I'm going to compare it to, but like Bart versus the Space Mutants or whatever, where you can't really do much. You're trying to not get hit. This is way better than that game, but it kind of reminded me of those style games kind of done right, because
Yeah.
obviously the Simpsons games on the Genesis were, a little um great covers though. They always lured you in with the Bart Simpson
Oh,
cover.
they
You're
tricked
like,
you with the covers. The covers
yeah,
were amazing, and then
yeah.
you get into the game and you're just like, man, they got me.
Yep. This game, I think the cover's fine. But I think, like you said, if they try to like rip off a style from the old days, like a Greg Martin, is that what you said? Is that the guy that
Yeah,
does the
yeah,
Sonic ones?
yeah.
Yeah, it would have worked. We needed a fat little fox just chilling on the cover with a sly smile on his face. Um, but yeah, I think it kind of does feel like a lost title, especially the music and when it's all put together when you watch the gameplay. It does. It's definitely, oddly enough, when playing it, it's not my type of style of game. At least when I was into the Sega Genesis, I was more into arcade action, which is funny because this game is really like the opposite of what you think about when you think of a Sega Genesis game. Because a lot of Sega games that were always kind of fast, action packed. At least for what I recall, we covered a ton of episodes here. There are obviously always one or two games that contradict that. Flashback and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But mostly Sega Genesis is known for their fast-paced action games. So I'm surprised that he did a more slower paced game, and I think it gives it a unique vibe.
For sure.
So let's talk about the development. Development began in 2013 when Phillips decided to teach himself how to the Motorola 68,000 is that assembly language specifically to make a Genesis game. At the time, he was openly stated that he had no prior experience with assembly programming. I'm assuming he had some programming experience, but just not assembly. Early development moves slowly, with progress often measured in tiny breakthroughs rather than a visible features. Phillips had explained that modern engines tend to shield developers from hardware behavior, whereas Genesis development requires constant awareness of memory layout, timing, and system limitations. Much of the early development time was spent simply learning how not to crash the system. How much respect does this give you for classic Genesis developers who had deadlines instead of unlimited time like Phillips did?
Yeah. So I mean, it's quite amazing. As we've learned, like we'll do an episode on a Genesis or Master System game, and it is, it's basically like an all time classic, and doing the notes, you're like, there's got to be some cool development stories. And then you learn pretty quickly it took them 2 months to make the game and they moved on. And it's like no one really thought to catalog their thoughts.
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't have any thoughts. I've been listening to the Seth Meyers and Lonely Island podcast where they do Each episode they do like a look back on a digital short, and it's kind of the same thing because they like Sunday comes, they've taped SNL, and then Monday morning they have to think up something, and they just kind of rush it because they have to. They only have a week to make it, and then they move on to the next thing. And sometimes they don't really have much to say about it. And I kind of think this is the same thing. It's one, it's a job. Two, it's they have to meet deadlines, and yeah, it's just kind of wild how indie developers can take so long, and then these old studios in Japan, they can just crank out like 100 games a year. It's wild.
And I will say that his whole experience with just having to deal with memory limitations and all that stuff, it's crazy that I want to say like, oh, it's because they had Sega support and they could call anyone at Sega and be like, oh, look, I'm stuck in this part and developing this game for your hardware. Can you help me? But if you read the Kent Horowitz, his book on American Sega Genesis development, they kind of didn't really have an engine. They had to like create their own and bootstrap it together, and it was kind of messy, and that's why we had a lot of bad games. So I'm surprised that video game developers could have such short windows, but maybe it was because they had to. It was part of their job. They were stuck in this building for 12 hours a day, or whatever they worked on to get the game out, while an indie developer could work on it 2 hours a week, go back to their regular job, and then come back slowly and piece things together and let it go. I don't want to speak for the development of this game because obviously we don't know how long he worked on it per week. But that leisure definitely is better for you mentally and lets you rethink a lot of the stuff that you do in the game, right? So, one of the most commonly discussed challenges Phillips has mentioned is debugging on real hardware. Without modern debugging tools, crashes could happen silently or inconsistently. Tracking down bugs often required repeated physical testing on actual Genesis consoles, flash cartridges, or development hardware. Philip was described spending days tracking down issues that ultimately came down to a single memory override or timing mistake, reinforcing how unforgiving the platform could be. Does knowing that there's so much limit on Sega Genesis debugging kind of forgive you some of the old Sega Genesis game that might have bugs? But I can't think of too many. Like, if they're bad game, I think the issue with a lot of the games I played, it wasn't the bugs per se, but more they were just badly designed.
Yeah, it was more either the limitation of the hardware. One common one I would see is that too many enemies would overtake the screen and the game would slow to a crawl. That was definitely apparent in Tailspin, where these little crabs would jump out and latch onto you, but they would start filling the screen and there would be like, almost 10 of these little crabs jumping around, and the game would be like in slow motion. And I was like, they could have done some testing and said, okay, let's limit the number of crabs that appear on the screen. But that's more of a design flaw, if anything. But I can be a bit forgiving. I think, though, when we get into indie game territory, especially when they're spending years on these games, that you want something more polished than what you get with commercially released Genesis games, which is a weird thing. Like, you expect more from an indie game that takes like 8 years to develop, whereas you should expect less from a game that has a 3-month turnaround time and is like based on like a globally popular IP. I don't know.
I would say that a lot of indie games nowadays do deliver on the time. I mean, that Silk Song game that from Hollow Knight, it won a bunch of awards. Obviously, it wasn't Expedition 33 or I was going to bring up Gang of Dragon, but I'd rather not. I'm not going to get sidetracked in this episode. But I think that not having debugging tools definitely slows down development, and I think it was probably developers back then probably drove themselves crazy. And it was probably hectic and not good. I think we take all, like, the fact that you could make a game right now in your house and it could be on the Nintendo Switch store. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And you have an engine that has debugging tools, rendering, everything built into it, and it's given away for free. That's actually kind of crazy. Like Unity and Unreal Engine 5, they're free to start whenever you feel like it. But I do have respect for someone that physically, even though he could probably have developed or decoded on the computer, he was like, nah, I'm using the real hardware and I'm going to be putting out the cartridge, putting it back in over and over again. That's wild. Early in development, Phillips worked using an original Sega Genesis development kit, later transitioning to a custom-built tools that still targeted real hardware behavior. He has stated that much of the project involved building the foundation first, level editors, asset pipelines, and testing tools before meaningful gameplay progress could even occur. He has noted that entire stretches of development produced no visible gameplay progress because of the underlying tools simply were not ready. How often do we underestimate how much tooling goes into making the games, especially on older hardware? And I think this is more apparent in like making the tools to create Sonic the Hedgehog, which you could tell sometimes influences the way things kind of look or feel in other games. I think Rice Star was another one we talked about recently that used assets or engines from Sonic Team. Do you think this is something that, I don't know, actually did help processes, and maybe a lot of the games we did play were because of these tool sets and foundations these developers created?
Yeah, I mean, I think we as just like gamers, I know you and I don't develop games. We only know about as much as we do from all the research we've done and all the reading, but we haven't actually got our hands dirty. But yeah, I think you and I specifically definitely underestimate just how much goes into these games. And I think that's fine, because I think and that goes for any type of media, like television, movie, video game. Like, if we're spending so much time either being in awe of how much work goes into it and being aware of that, or if it's almost like taking us away from the experience because we're like, again, very much aware of how much work went into the game. I can't really think of many instances where that happens, but maybe, gosh, like I think maybe movies that are overly designed to the point where you're like, yeah, someone spent way too much time on the sets and the costumes and everything, and I'm only paying attention to those things and not the actual story itself because it's just like paper thin, weak. But I think the video game equivalent to that would maybe be like a very beautiful game that plays very poorly. I haven't seen that much, but yeah, I just think we as players shouldn't be aware of that, and I don't think we should feel bad about not being aware of that, just because the whole intent is for us to jump in and be engrossed in like the video game itself and not the process. But having said that, I think it's very important to know about these things, and I think indie games are a excellent way for people now to learn about how these processes work. Not to go on too much a tangent, but like you look at film and television, no one's like doing what they did in the silent film era anymore. Like that's
true.
Just not happening. But video games, you will have people now making, like Angry Video Game Nerd is releasing a NES title next year. Like he didn't specifically make it, but he has a team of people, a small team, making a game for NES hardware. But it's not as though next year there's going to be a film coming out that is silent, filmed on original, film stock of the 1920s era, utilizing all of the original technology. No one's doing that.
I will say the closest
And yet,
is the
yeah.
people that still shoot on film, even though I mean,
Mm,
and or I would say somebody like Quentin Tarantino, they release a 75 millimeter film. Though I feel like
right.
he has it more of it's a physical thing, so it's like kind of like us downloading the game or buying it physical, kind of an idea in that era. Like he's not going back to 1930s 4x3 silent film, those little cameras, you know. He's just shooting at the highest resolution film he could possibly do.
For sure, but they're still using so many modern
Oh yeah,
conventions.
and
But
techniques.
I think video, yeah, and yet I think video games are really the only form of narrative art where people can still go back and make games for old hardware and have the exact same limitations that people did back in the 1970s and 80s. So that's actually really special and very interesting. And I think that's why people get so jazzed about indie games like Tanglewood, because it's like they get to see what the hardware is capable of. I actually, just the other day, actually this morning, I watched a video of Virtua Fighter 4 running on a Dreamcast, and it was just a tech demo that some fans did, but it looked amazing. And I'm like, wow, this is the same limitations that Sega had, and yet here it is. It's happening. So,
It's crazy some of
yeah.
the stuff that these developers online have sacrificed their time to make happen, especially Grand Theft Auto 3. I'm not gonna I'm not
Yeah.
gonna talk too much about it,
No.
but I remember when I was on the internet, people would say that it was no way that the Dreamcast could run Grand Theft Auto 3. I'm glad we solved that case, and it looks fantastic. So, let's talk about design philosophy. Phillips intentionally designed Tanglewood to avoid traditional combat. Nim cannot attack enemies directly. Instead, players must rely on environmental interactions, light sources, movement, timing, and enemy behavior to survive. Phillips has stated that this was done to make a player feel vulnerable, emphasizing tension and caution rather than power. Darkness itself was designed as a core gameplay mechanic, not just a visual effect. Limited visibility forces players to slow down, observe patterns, and learn how creatures react to movement and light. How does this philosophy compare to other Genesis platformers that emphasize speed, reflexes, and combat?
I mean, obviously, there's a huge difference between what this game does and what probably like 90% of the original Genesis library did. And that's just because marketing wise and the era that the Genesis was in was not like, I would say that maybe the Xbox Live Arcade era, where we got a lot of games where it was like Braid. Remember that game?
Mm-hmm.
And what's that? It's on Switch, but it was also on Xbox Live Arcade. It was the black and white one with the little boy running from the spiders.
Oh, Limbo?
Limbo. Yeah, and so it seems like because of what the 90s brought us, there was this like reaction from developers to be like, all right, I'm going to make a game, but it's not going to have combat. It's not going to have supersonic speeds and everything. It's going to be a slow, moody, methodic game with puzzles, and your character is basically the only thing they can do is like run, jump, and push and pull things. But yeah, and so thinking back, like games that are similar maybe to Tanglewood would actually probably be like some of the kids titles. Like I know for sure that the Barney the Dinosaur game has no combat. It's just walking around and looking for letters. I've actually played it recently, and technically, like on a technical level, it was actually pretty cool. Also, Pocahontas is a really beautiful Genesis game. I don't think there's like hand-to-hand combat. I think it's actually very similar to Tanglewood in that regard. And I'm trying to think what else, but The Lion King did have combat, but when you were little Simba, I think your attack was roaring and like swatting at things, but you weren't like going full on like, lion mode until you grew up. But yeah, I mean, would you agree that it was really just a reaction to the Genesis era that caused developers in like the 2000s, especially in the indie arena, to try something new and different?
I think I read this article like maybe a long time ago, maybe 2009 or 8, about how it was basically framed that we as humans only find entertainment in violence, and that's why video games conceive that. And I think there was a counter argument article made after that saying that it's just the easiest way for gameplay to happen, because if you think about most passive things we do in real life, we're not violent in real life. Like if we were always drawn to violence, we would just be kicking people every single time we had the chance. But that this is a fantasy, and that humans want to do stuff that they're not really allowed to do in real life. And violence is the easiest thing to put into gameplay that's universally understood. And it has this progression system to it too, and all this other stuff. And it went into it, and I kind of agreed. Developing a game that does not have combat is really hard. I think the biggest case in point for that was Shenmue, the first game. People legit hated that game because there wasn't enough fighting. And that's why Yakuza has these like random fights all of a sudden, all the time, to have you in combat as much as possible, because people got drawn away from Shenmue because of just exploring or talking to people and being more mundane. That's what people would say. Would you agree with that, though, that Shenmue was kind of clowned on when it came out because of its lack of combat in the first game?
100%. I think a lot of people expected Shenmue to be like Sega's answer to Grand Theft Auto, and other similar titles, and it just wasn't. In fact, I think the reaction to that was Yakuza, and the American marketing, where they really tried to push it as like, it's basically Japanese GTA, and it's like, well, it still isn't. It actually has a lot of Shenmue comparisons being made, where even though you do fight a lot more, I would say, in Yakuza than Shenmue, you don't fight everywhere all at once, especially in the PlayStation 2 originals. But yeah, Shenmue, I mean, outside, there isn't that much combat in Shenmue either. I would say Shenmue and Tanglewood have a lot in common. Kind of, yeah. I mean, it's not Shenmue, definitely not an indie game by one person, but right.
Visually, Tanglewood emphasizes atmosphere over spectacle. Phillips has spoken about deliberately using shadow silhouettes to retain color palettes to create a mood rather than trying to overwhelm the hardware. He has suggested that restraint often works better on Genesis hardware than raw visual scale. Does Tanglewood feel more like an early Genesis title focused on mood, or a late era game creatively pushing the hardware? For me, I would say it does give it the game gives me a very early Sega Genesis vibe with the art. I think there was there's parts in this game that do look late era. Some of his choices, but some parts look early. It's this weird mix. Definitely, you could tell it's an indie title because of some of the art assets. It's definitely doesn't look. I think we just talked about a late era game. Was it Rice Star? Or was it? Yeah, and I think that game obviously looks better than this. The animation's obviously better. They had so many years of the Sega Genesis with expert people that have already had so many titles under their belt. So comparing it is kind of late, not fair. But so to me, 100%. This reminds me of early, like maybe Ghostbusters era or Dick Tracy even. But what about you?
This game really feels maybe like a late era Genesis game that some, American developer who had roots in, like, maybe this was their first one and only game, or I honestly, the game really reminds me of, artistically, it reminds me of Lion King, but gameplay wise, it kind of reminds me of Flashback. It almost feels like it comes from that, American PC developer mindset, where it's a lot more focused on the artistry and it's trying to do something new. In fact, I would say, from an animation standpoint, you have like Don Bluth, and I feel like this is more in that kind of vein, where it's somewhat it seems like a game from someone with a lot of talent, but not wanting to be Disney, not wanting to be Sonic, but instead looking elsewhere, maybe even looking to Europe, like French animation and French video games, Rayman, things like that. Yeah, I think if anything, like a French or British developer, I think a lot of their games kind of remind me of this.
I have to agree. It does remind me of a non-Japanese game, just because of the gameplay, like you said. Audio and music development. The soundtrack was composed specifically for the YM2612 sound chip, with Phillips noting that the Genesis audio can easily sound harsh if mishandled, which we already know. He has described composing for the system as an exercise in restraint, focusing on texture and mood rather than melody-heavy compositions. Sound design also plays a critical role in gameplay. The audio cues subtly signaling danger, proximity of predators, and environmental changes. I actually think that the soundtrack's really well done in this game. It sounds good, great on the Genesis. And I do agree with him. I hate the fact that we have these like grainy, disgusting, like low budget games, and then everyone's like, "See, Super Nintendo had the best sound." Everyone knows that. But how do you compare this to something like I don't know if you've heard the soundtrack enough, but something like Echo the Dolphin, The Ooze.
I from what I remember of the soundtrack, it's a little more moody, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, I can't. Why don't you speak to the soundtrack? I'll be honest. I played the game 2 weeks ago, and the soundtrack hasn't stuck in my head.
Okay, I mean, I'm kind of the same way. I really don't listen to the soundtrack. I thought the soundtrack was great. Compared to Echo, I would say it gave me the same vibes as those type of games. Echo doesn't have like a melodic soundtrack. It has more of a very atmosphere to it. I think they did good. This game does actually remind me, now that I think about it, like Echo the Dolphin, where it's like strange. Like Echo the Dolphin isn't a game where you just go forward. You have to do things to unlock areas to do. So it does remind me a lot of Echo, and I guess the soundtrack kind of does too. Though I do think that Echo did have that cool, you could jump out of the water. Every game needs to have a thing where you jump out of the water the way you do in Echo. Let's talk about more development. Across multiple interviews, Philip has shared a number of development horror stories that highlighted just how unforgiving Genesis development can be. One of the recurring issues involved memory corruption, where a small mistake in assembly code could overwrite unrelated data elsewhere in memory. This often resulted in crashes or glitches that appear completely disconnected from their cause, leading to days of investigation for what sometimes amounted to a single misplaced instruction. Okay, it's like, can you imagine being at your work and you're editing an image and you edit one thing on something, and that edit forced you to something that you did on another project to just disappear or be overridden? So now you have to figure out which keystroke or which pixel you moved. I mean, that's just insane. That sounds like I would not want to work ever at this industry or hardware again.
Yeah, no, I mean, I work in graphic design, and a lot of my stuff has either backups or ways to not lose your work, or at least you can go back, undo. But in this case, yeah, I don't think there's an undo button sometimes, and there's definitely not a, like, Photoshop will crash and then it'll say, you'll restart it and it'll say, would you like to recover your documents? Yes, please. And they're just like there. But I don't even want to think about video game development, especially on the Genesis. My God.
Did you ever wanted to, like, did you ever think, man, maybe if I like study enough, I could make a Genesis game, or at least try to make my idea for a Genesis game?
I mean, it's always been like something that would be fun, but I don't have the time or energy to commit to it. Though I did take a video game design class when I was in, I think maybe like middle school. And I did develop a game using, and I don't remember what the software was called, but it used turtles. Like, as in, the turtle was like the kind of default for, I think, the player. So it would appear on the screen, and then you would replace the turtle with your sprite. But instead of calling it like the hero or the main character, it would call it the turtle. I'll have to look that up. But I did make a game with like a knight who had to get from like one place to another, and it played a lot like a. Visually, it looked like maybe a Master System game, but it played a lot like an Atari game. But
were you
yeah,
proud?
That was a lot of work.
Did you were you proud of your work that you created?
I was. I remember there were like maybe 4 scenes, and you could connect the scenes. Like if you leave the right of this screen, you will appear to the left of this screen. And I remember there were things where it's like you had to pick up an item, and then later on it would come in handy. And there was another scene with ghost enemies, and you had to like dodge them as you were going through. Otherwise, if they hit you, you would return to the beginning. So yeah, it was, I think it was called A Knight's Night. Like,
wow.
Like A Knight's Night. And so it was like one night as a knight going from the castle to do this little quest. And it was, obviously I don't have it saved. Like it probably exists on a floppy disk that somewhere I took home that I can only use on that software that I didn't own. So, it's lost media now. Barry's only video game that he developed.
And if you did this, would you have gone through the like pain of developing it on real hardware, or would you have been like, I'm using modern tools and porting it to Genesis?
Well, you have to realize that this was probably in the mid '90s, so I was porting it. It was on real hardware. Oh. You know, technically it was a mid '90s PC game.
All right. I mean, in what language was it, or was it just more of a plug and play for kids to learn design?
What it did, there was a coding side to it, but I think it was also it was both visual and coding. I'll have to look it up. I'll peek around while the show continues. But yeah.
So Phillips has also described timing-related bugs that appeared only on real hardware. Certain routines would have would behave correctly in emulation, but then fell on actual Genesis hardware due to subtle timing differences. These issues force constant real hardware testing and invalidated features that initially seemed complete. Why do you... So here's the thing. Can you tell the difference between emulation and real hardware? Because apparently, like, even when you develop on real hardware, somehow it works on emulation, but not on real hardware. I don't know how that works. Like, he says it's because of timing, right? So did he, why does it work on, if he worked on this on actual hardware, first and foremost, why would it not work on real hardware but work on emulation? That's the thing that when I read about this got me a little weird. It's like, is there something that emulation does better than real hardware? I mean, of course it does. It's modern, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I've experienced the opposite. I've seen Knuckles Chaotix and Sonic Pocket Adventure just like completely struggle on the emulators that I had. I've since bought the games, so I don't really emulate them anymore. But yeah, I've never experienced that. But I'd presume, that you can go within the emulator, or maybe even the emulator looks for issues and corrects them, but I'd have to imagine that the emulator is also acting as like an overclocked machine, correct? Like it can do everything that the Genesis can do, but it's using the power of a modern personal computer.
And
so that's interesting.
You've played on real hardware. You have real hardware, and you've played a lot on the Sega emulation. There's a lot of people that talk, about the differences between these two. To you, is it really that much better to play on real hardware compared to the like Sega Genesis 2 Mini, or is it this kind of the same in its preferences?
I mean, for me, playing on real hardware can't be beat, and I think in the case of indie titles, to see them actually working on real hardware is a true accomplishment. I've been downloading the occasional, maybe not indie games, but like games where they've taken unfinished, unreleased stuff and made them playable. What did I play recently? I played I think it was a wacky. I think it was an unreleased Wacky Races Genesis game. I played that recently. I played a unreleased Super Star Wars, like the SNES version of Star Wars, playing on the Genesis, and it was just really amazing. Even though I'm using, I'm using the EverDrive, it's the same as using the actual cartridge, and it's really amazing. Whereas if I do it on my computer here, I don't feel that amazed by it. And if anything, the graphics don't look the same, obviously, because a CRT can't do what, or I should say, a computer can't do what a CRT can do. So yeah, there's no contest, and I'm an what's that, OEM? Someone called me that recently. I was like going off on how I just get so annoyed by people saying, "Oh, if you want to play Phantasy Star Online, all you got to do is buy this kit, and then you buy this other converter. You don't even need real hardware." And I'm like, "But I want real hardware. I want to hear that CD spinning. I want to have my VMU operating. I want the real controller in my hands, and I want to know that I'm getting internet through my Dreamcast. Like, I think that's part of the magic." And going back to what we were talking about with like Tarantino and the like, who are still using like old film stock. I've seen 70 millimeter in theaters not too long ago, and it is amazing. It looks so much different than what a digital projector can do. Not that I'm not against digital projection, I love it, but if a movie is projected in 70 millimeter, it's there's no contest. And I think it's the same with Genesis video games, playing it on the or Dreamcast or anything, like playing it on the real hardware. Part of the appeal is knowing that hardware is making that game happen. I think Shenmue 2 is a big one. Like when I played that on Xbox, it was cool. When I played it on Dreamcast, though, when I imported the European one, it was amazing. I was like, look at the scope of this game and all the characters on screen, and this is my little Dreamcast that, can play Choo Choo Rocket, but can also play Shenmue 2. It's just... yeah, and I cry.
I think it's I think emulation's obviously gotten a lot better. I think companies have been making like analog products are considered high class way of playing Sega Genesis games, even though they're technically is emulated, right? But mimicking real hardware. Correct. I don't know how that goes. And then it has a converter already on there. But I will say the thing I disagree with Quentin Tarantino's when he said VHSs were better than DVD. No way. Get out of here.
Oh, yeah.
No one. And if you agree with that and you're in the audience, I'm okay. I'll respect your opinion. So another thing he complained about was tool burnout, because many of the tools he had were built from scratch. Progress could stall entirely when tools failed or needed rewriting. Big problem.
Oh,
this kind of reminds me of the Edian. What is it? Islium. What was it game called again? whatever Shadows. Remember they were going to make like a development.
Elysian Shadows. Yeah.
They were going to make an
Yeah.
engine for it. I actually thought that was probably the most brilliant idea, because I feel like if Philips and other people get together and make this like engine that makes it tools easier for people to make Sega Genesis games, that would be incredible, because I don't think there's ever been something. I mean, I'm sure there's probably an indie game that did it, but from the outside, development may have appeared frozen, even though major fundamental work was still happening behind the scenes. I mean, this talks about if it changes the way you think of indie development timelines. My thing is more like, I feel a little jaded when I see projects that don't move in the timeline. Not because I want to assume the best of most people and just assume that it's like Phillips here, where he was building something that he had not too much experience with, and there was a lot of trial and errors. But I feel like a lot of indie games that ask for money sometimes on Kickstarter take the money, and the motivation kind of leaves once the money hits their bank account, and they move on to other things. So how do you feel about when you see a Kickstarter project that you might have supported and it doesn't move for years?
Well, I mean, you just mentioned Elysian Shadows. They're the one that really soured me on indie game Kickstarters, unless it's someone who has a proven track record or who I've backed before and they've shown that they can release the game. I think the best are the ones where the game's actually completed and they're just looking for the money to put it on cartridge or put it on a storefront. But yeah, it's yeah. I've learned my lesson on Kickstarters. I think actually the most recent gaming one I backed was Dancing with Ghosts from the Toe Jam and Earl developer, Greg Johnson.
Oh, nice.
And I only did like the $10 or $15 tier, but I'm looking forward to that one.
Not that jaded, see? Late in development, Phillips encountered stress while preparing physical cartridge builds. Differences between development setups and final cartridge hardware exposed a last-minute bug that had never appeared before. Fixing these issues under manufacturing pressure was one of the most intense phases in development. Honestly, though, this is probably for an indie developer with an actual timeline with a manufacturer is probably the closest Phillips got to actually developing in the 1990s, because like imagine how many deadlines they had. It wasn't just that, it was like they had to they had to deal with the same thing. I mean, how stressful do you think like a developer like Ancient was when they were about to ship Streets of Rage 2, like knowing that they only had a couple of weeks to finalize bugs and get it on cart, and then once it's on cart, it's forever. Like those are the early reviews. Yeah. Those are the first people that talk about it. At least Phillips had the ability to be like, okay, I screwed up. I'll give people refunds or something like that, and then try again. It might have cost him a lot of money, but he had the ability to do that. But back then, that wasn't a thing. Reception would have trashed you, and it would have been over. How terrifying would it be to discover new bugs after committing to physical production? I mean, we don't know anything about development, so this question doesn't apply to us. But I think it shows you that you should be 100% testing everything, even on a test build. I don't know if you buy records, but a lot of bands do test presses, and they ship them to them, and they listen to them. Then they finally produce the massive quantities for the fans. Maybe that's what he should have done. Maybe this is a learning lesson. But I feel like, do you do test prints before you print all your prints?
Yeah. Well, I work with a printer, and they'll send a like PDF proof. But if it's a huge print, they're going to send physical, like one or two physical copies over. But they have a team who will actually review it themselves and like sign off on it internally. So yeah, but yeah, you know, there are some checks. It's mainly like spelling errors are the ones that really get you. Thankfully, I haven't had that yet. So
Have you ever, like when you first started your career, like designed something, got so excited that you turned it in, then there was like this printing, and it's just you ruined all the hundreds of copies that you guys printed out, or has that never happened to you?
like it had some mistake or something.
Mistake, or you thought it was going to look a certain way on the paper, but the layout wasn't what you envisioned?
I think color not coming out the way you wanted it to is always a thing, especially if you want a color that pops or like a a really bright color, and then it comes out and it's kind of faded and you realize that you didn't have CMYK or RGB correct. It's especially easy right now because I mean I'm actually thinking of a project I'm working on right now where it's a digital project, but I'm sure if people want it printed, I'll have to make a print version, which means I have to convert all the colors. And I don't think anyone I work with is listening to this, but like I'll be 100% honest. Like sometimes in the crunch or in the rush, I'll just be like, if it looks good enough on my screen, then this is what we got to go with, like
Yeah.
But that's going from digital to digital. Going from digital to print definitely does. You have to do those checks and be like, oh man. Like I guess what I'm saying is I'm not too bothered if like some CMYK colors are slipped in there when I exported a digital image, if it still looks accurate and good. But I think going from digital to print, there's definitely things that can go wrong. Yeah.
One of the things that I never really thought about the printing process. I always assumed when I was younger that like whatever the art looked like or digital screens, that it just was 1-to-1 on the page. I read a book about comic book paper and printing and why comics look the way they do, and they use certain things because of the lack of quality paper that they used. And the inks, and to make it pop out, sometimes you had to use brighter colors than you normally would, and that's why a lot of some of the early comics look the way they do. And I think it might still even be an issue now. I mean, this is more about going backwards and going forwards. Do you think comic books look better digitally on the screen or printed on paper?
Oh, paper, 100%.
Okay.
Also, I just think paper is just easier on the eyes. It's not backlit. I do know they make color. What are those
E-ring?
Those like Amazon tablet, Kindle.
I got one and I returned it. That's all I gotta say about that.
You didn't like it.
Okay, I'll just so the color is not all there, which is fine. I didn't get it primarily for the color. I got it primarily because I like the idea that you have a color cover of the book before you read it. But when I was reading my book, the text was more blurry than the paper white, and I have the paper white here, and so I compared it, and I'm like, no, I can't read this. How am I going backwards on text? I primarily use it for reading books. So I returned it. It was too expensive too. It was like over $150, and I'm like, yeah, the color is a little off, which is fine. It's an e-ink, and I understand the limitations. I kind of wanted to read some comic books on it off of Libby, so I was gonna use it to catch up on some Batman stuff, but then I was like, I can't. So I'll just read it online or on my phone or something, but I can't do it on there. So sorry, it didn't sit right with me. So print it is for me. I think maybe physically check them out. Finally, Phillips has discussed the mental toll of working largely alone on the project of this scope. He described periods of doubt where major setbacks erased weeks of progress, community encouragement, and visible interest from the retro fans played a major role in pushing the project to completion. That's a good thing. I mean, I think, I know we complain about social media and being connected with people because humans are hard sometimes, especially when we're mixed with bots from other countries trying to make us angry. Sometimes you don't know what's real, but sometimes the retro community is sweet and supportive. I know me and you have gotten a lot of support for stuff that we do and encouragement, and we always appreciate it. Do you think there's probably a lot of developers out there that tried to make games back in the old days, maybe like not as indie, but smaller teams that dissuaded themselves without knowing public opinion on what they were working on? Or maybe even you have a large scale graphic project that you worked on, and without any feedback, you kind of self-doubted what you were working on?
Yeah, I mean, I can see if we're talking back in the day that a lot of the work that developers did, they didn't know what the feedback was or what people thought of it, either the end. I mean, definitely not the in progress product. I think almost all video games developed in the 80s and 90s were really the only people seeing it were your friends, family, and maybe coworkers. And outside of that, you're not getting anyone seeing it. But nowadays, everyone's always online. You can post screenshots and trailers, and I think sometimes it works positively because it obviously, like with Tanglewood, gets someone the motivation to complete the project. On the other end, you have the likes of Elysian Shadows, where it kind of pumps up their ego, makes them think that they're hot shit when they're not, and makes them overpromise and underdeliver, or overpromise and not deliver. I know you brought up GTA 3. Right now, the Elysian Shadows guy, Falco, is basically just trying to take credit for any and all Dreamcast ports happening right now. He's connected with me on LinkedIn, of all places, and I see his posting constantly about all of his projects and all of this and that, and he's like, oh yeah, new coding, blah 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 blah, and it's just like, as soon as he sticks his head in the Elysian Shadows Kickstarter, people just go after him, and they're like, you're
not hot
terrible.
Shit. You're shit.
No. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I think nowadays, I think it's great that video game developers can show their stuff off in progress rather than wait until it goes out there. But I can speak from my own experience that, yeah, having people comment on my work and tell me that I'm, they enjoy what I'm doing helps. Actually, that even with doing these, like, we've been doing this podcast for years, and we've been doing SEGA Bits since 2010. And I'll be honest, like, not many people reach out to you or I and say, like, I enjoy what you do, or, like, really comment on it. And so when people do, and I think Patreon especially has been a great way to connect with people and actually hear feedback, both positive and negative, more positive than negative, thankfully, but that really helps. And to be quite honest, I feel like you and I both kind of lived in that dark void of not hearing what people were thinking about what we were putting out there, and that would cause us at times to do less than we would be doing, And
so. I did Falco, the guy, actually do any development on GTA 3 port? Because if he did, congratulations, you got some work completed.
I don't know the specifics, but I feel as though he was taking a lot more credit for certain things. I think he was like part of teams. I don't want to speak out of turn, but again, he's like a big hype man, yeah.
Let's look at the a real Kickstarter, the Tanglewood Kickstarter page. Right. This is a project that delivered. It got 892 backers, pledging 54,830 euros, which is that in American? I have no idea. How much you think that is? Oh, it's $73,000, not today's money. So he got a year's worth. I mean, I don't know. I mean, how much is the average wage in America? I would say it's 70, right? Does that sound right?
I guess so. Yeah.
I actually don't know.
Sure.
Maybe 60. So he got like a year's worth of wages. I don't think he's obviously running to the bank off this Kickstarter and retiring early. So I'm happy that we have a Kickstarter project from a person that actually finished it and delivered what they promised. I was fixing your camera, sorry. I think it's nice that it does, and it's also still available to purchase on physical cartridge. So on Genesis, and I'm happy that it's not like the other title that, in my opinion, looks nice, but I'll never be able to play it, called Paparim, because they never actually, like, I don't know if you've seen the whole drama behind that game, but supposedly there's a warehouse with thousands of these Paparim games, and they just didn't ship enough, and the manufacturing stopped. So I'm happy that, you could buy Tanglewood for $60 and support this guy. I think that's cool. I also think it's cool that he finished it. I think the cover is kind of weird, though, because, I mean, it's right here. You can already see it. Why do you think these developers don't just mimic the full, like, Mega Drive look? Do you think there's, like, legal issues here? They always go for something that's completely different. Like, look at the Genesis type, like the spine and everything. It looks different than it does on the actual Genesis, the original cartridges.
Yeah. I don't know. I think what it is there's a fear of copyright infringement and Sega coming after them, but then you see other developers who will just straight up put the Dreamcast logo on there and make the game look exactly like an American or Japanese Dreamcast design, and Sega doesn't care. So I think it's both fear of litigation, and also I think just feeling like it's going to look less like a bootleg and more authentic if they actually steer clear of those things. But it's like it plays on a Genesis, so you don't have to call it like 16-bit Mega or something. Like you can call it something else.
I mean, it works perfectly fine on the Genesis, and I noticed that Limited Run Games does this too. Even though they work with Sega and release Sega games, I'm like, don't you think that Sega would give you the okay to put Sega Saturn on there? And your logo is somewhere on the bottom.
Right.
So I think that's weird. But Tanglewood was promoted primarily through development blogs, convention appearances, and word of mouth through the retro community. Phillips credited crowdfunding and community support as essential to the project. And let's look at the launch trailer for the game. I have it right there. This trailer came out 7 years ago. So let's play it. Big Evil Corp is his corporation is his development name. I like it. Mm-hmm. We had the guy that did before I press play. We had the guy that did Night Trap. His development studio was called Screaming Villain. So a lot of Sega fans,
I was just thinking about him.
Are into being villains, right? Like, or being bad guys, Let's play it then. It's like a film with the little...
Yeah.
The
I haven't
zoom.
watched this since 7 years ago.
Yeah. What do you think about him when he captures the footage? He captures the whole screen, even the overcast or whatever they call it, the overlay. So it's for CRT TVs, right? Like, so when you see it on your CRT, do you see the border?
Do I?
Yeah.
I don't think I do.
Because like
I
Sonic,
don't. No, I don't think I do.
I'm pretty sure that's why it's for old TVs. When I play it off of what's that machine called? The OSSC, where you connect it so it can give you the signal. It does have
Yeah.
it, but it has settings where you could crop it, so it looks
Oh.
like just the picture without it. I just thought it was funny that he included it to be like, this is real hardware, man. Look at this. It even has the little like in the bottom where it gets the little fuzzies. I don't know what that's even called. The little interference. It's because it's stuff you're not supposed to see when you're on a CRT. I thought it was cool that he added that in the trailer. So, the game launched August 2018 with physical cartridges for the Sega Genesis / Mega Drive, along with digital releases. The success demonstrated that there's still a viable audience for new games on the legacy Sega hardware. So Sega should have never moved on back in '95. This is proof. For real though. It also just came out the other day on the Nintendo Switch, yesterday.
Yeah.
And it's only $9.99. So if you have a Nintendo Switch 1 or 2, definitely check that out. If you have $20 or $60, you could buy it on actual cartridge. Let me see if I can find the website, because I saw it. Oh, Mega Cat Studios sells it. The cartridge version with different cover art than the one that was on the Kickstarter. It has more of a anime art on it. $60 cartridge, only $50. Obviously, if you're gonna buy it, you might as well buy it with the box and the manual.
Right.
Do you think $60 is too much for real hardware? I mean, like a real Sega Genesis game?
No, I've always stood by that, like, and this is like for used games, for indie games, like on old hardware. If it's around 50 or 60, which is like retail price for a video game, I'm not bothered. Like, I don't buy that many used or indie games anymore, but when I do, I'm all right with that price point. I'm trying to think the last time I bought a physical indie game. You know, you know what did happen is Video Games New York. You remember them?
Right.
They, out of the blue, emailed my, like, I think they got in touch with me specifically, and they were like, we're going to send you some games. And I was like, this was, I think at a time, a couple years ago, I was like overwhelmed with other stuff. I think it was like pandemic and kids and work. And I'm like, I'll take it, but you want me to do coverage for 8 different games? And I didn't really do any coverage for them because I'm like, dudes, what do you expect me to do? Like, thank you for the games, but my God, I'm only one person. So I enjoyed the games, but I didn't do any coverage. And I think they realized their mistake in sending me. But the games weren't all that great. They were like, kind of crummy.
Well,
not Tanglewood, but they were like,
don't send Barry anything.
Sorry.
He'll hate on it. Upon release, Tanglewood was praised for his authenticity. Oh my God. Atmosphere and ambition, while some criticism focused on the deliberate pacing and difficulty. I kind of agree with that. It's a short game too, if you know what you're doing. Phillips has expressed satisfaction that the game sparked broader discussion about what is authentic retro development and what it actually means beyond surface level aesthetics. Today, Tanglewood is frequently mentioned alongside Xenocrisis, which they had a Galloping Ghost, and Demons of Astenberg, Borg, is that how you say that?
Yeah,
a
sure.
proof that new commercial viable games can still be made for legacy Sega hardware. Is
Mm.
Tanglewood more impressive as a technical achievement or as a gameplay experience?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think with the Echo the Dolphin games, technically they were amazing, but you very rarely heard about people who are like, "Oh man, I remember stage 5." Like people don't really talk about playing through Echo. They more talk about those first moments and just the graphics themselves. But I think with Tanglewood, the people I do know that have played it, they've enjoyed the game itself, not just like the tech demo that is like the first stage. I think it's a sign of a beautiful bad game when more people just remember the first stage than anything else because the game design itself is bad.
Oh,
And that kind of goes back to what we were saying at the beginning. Like, you're spending so much time being marveled at the technology and less time actually enjoying the game because the game itself has so many issues. But I don't think that's Tanglewood. What would you say?
I would say it's most known from what I've heard from everyone that talks about it for being developed on real Sega Genesis hardware. I don't think it
Yeah.
actually pushes like the Genesis. Like if you see this game, you're not like this is the best that Genesis could do. It pushed it to new
Yeah.
heights. I think there's sometimes games that indie that do that. This one's not it. I think that's my only drawback, but I think the impressive is that he created it all on Sega Genesis hardware. And I don't know if that's enough for people to be like, okay, well, I guess it is enough because he got kickstarted because of his development workflow. Um,
Right.
and I will say I would say we just discussed Grand Theft Auto 3. That's an impressive feat, in my opinion, because that was something that people were like, that's impossible, man. That'll never happen. It would be like if they make a complete 1-to-1 Donkey Kong Country 2 port on the Sega Genesis that runs 100% on the hardware. That's kind of like the Grand Theft Auto 3 thing. This one is more I think it's impressive that I think it's more a technical achievement because he made it on hardware from scratch without ever doing assembly. I think that's really, really impressive. I hope his next game does more of pushing the hardware, parallax scrolling and all this stuff that Treasure did. But in his game, I think that would really be impressive. Like he's already mastered the foundation. I want to see someone push it to the absolute limit that it could do. And I think that's like Paparim. I think that does that a little bit, even though they had to put extra hardware on their Genesis cartridge to get it done. I would like to see one that just 100% uses the Genesis only. But those are my last and final thoughts on this game. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, Tanglewood, I think it is an achievement of one person. I think it definitely has a lot in common with those legit Genesis era games, just because you look back at the teams, and like, the teams are like just a handful of people. I can't think of that many that were one person, but definitely, a small room of a few people. So in that regard, it's a small passion project of one person who, they did make it, and it is a solid title. And the fact that it's still mentioned now alongside Xenocrisis really says a lot to the quality. Not many people are talking about, man, I don't know, I'm looking over there. Pure Solar, I would say, is up there too. Xenocrisis, Tanglewood, Pure Solar. But yeah, there's a lot that just people forgotten about, or much more recent indie titles too. So it says a lot. But yeah, applause, and we spoke to them too.
It wasn't
believe
me
it or
that
not,
did the
it just-
interview.
I did, right? Oh my god, it was me, right?
It wasn't you. How was it
Oh, it
you
was-
if you didn't remember?
There was a video
How?
though. There was a Swing and
Oh.
Report show.
Oh yeah. Well, I was looking at the website one. That was Aki. So
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Oh, man.
Okay. I was miss. Okay.
I I understand, though, why those talk show hosts, like you see, why they
you're right.
don't remember. They don't remember what they talked about like a year ago, and they'll forget that they even met someone, because I don't remember talking to the Tanglewood developer at all. I didn't even know they were British until like 5 minutes ago. Oh boy. But this was your episode, not mine, so I can't be blamed. But let's talk about, well, first let's read our Patreon memories. So if you support us on Patreon at any level, you can have your memories read at the end of the show. This was a Ben Hayward picker wheel pick. I would like to remind our premium picker tiers to jump in there right now. I believe we have, was it Nicholas Schaefer is a premium picker. They have 2 picks. They are due for 2 picks, November, December. So put those in. We'll add them to the schedule for January. As for our picker wheel folks, we will be spinning that on the next episode, which I'll tell you about after I read your memories. So Ben Hayward said, I've been going back and forth on whether to get this, which is why I'm really looking forward to the episode. I think it's really cool that the game was made using 90s development tools, if I understand correctly. I even saw a video online talking about how they were also making sure it worked properly on the at-games console so that it could have better reach. Thanks for such a great run of episodes this year. Nicholas Schaefer says, I remember seeing the trailers for this and being very impressed and putting it on my wish list, but haven't gotten it yet. Hoping this podcast will motivate me to bump it to the front of the list. And finally, Daniel Andres says, I didn't even know that this was a Genesis game. I'm going to have to give myself some time after this episode to check it out, possibly in the new year. And yeah, I'll let you all know too, the Kickstarter, if you check it out, actually has a download of a demo. Now, I'm sure the official game is out there that you could download, but I would advise against it because this is a game that the creator is still making money off of. So I'd prefer people like actually buy it. But there is a legit Genesis playable demo on the Kickstarter that you can download and check out too.
And if you have an EverDrive, I think he offers a digital version for the ROM. I mean, you could like buy the ROM and load it up, so you could do that. So it's cool.
There you go. So this is our last episode of the year. We will be back, I'm going to say, the first full week of January. So you can expect an episode to drop then. What are we going to be talking about? Well, I have decided that we are going to go to the chamber, Picks in the Chamber. We are going to kick off the new year with an episode where we're going to be taking a look at SEGA game box art and design, as well as the cases. And I'm talking about not video game art. I'm talking about the templates around it. We're going to be talking about those weird little, like, white things with the little red glowy triangle that they tried for a little bit when the Dreamcast launched in America. We're going to be talking about the Master System in America having those, like, grids with, like, stock art on top of it, or clip art almost on top of it. But we're really just going to be taking a look, an overview of how each region approached the templates that we would see. I'm looking forward to that. I think we'll do America
as a primary.
I think we could do America, Europe, and Japan. We'll see, because I don't want to dig a hole and then be like, this will be a 5-parter. Maybe we'll stick to America. We'll start in America, and then we'll move to Japan and Europe for future ones. I think that sounds more manageable. But we'll see. But also, we're going to probably wrap the year up. I'm thinking December 29th or 30th, we'll get together on the Swing and Report Show live, and we'll have our favorite and most disappointing games of the year episode. Knock that one out. And that just about does it. George, do you want to sign us out or off?
Thanks for watching and listening. Bye.
Bye.